In today's video, I'm going to be talking about letters of recommendation. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get to it. Number 1, how many letters should you actually ask for? This is a question that I get a lot. In my last video, I talked about who to ask for letters of recommendation, and in that video, we discussed the importance of researching each school that you're interested in and looking at their specific guidelines on this. Hopefully you have done that and you have compiled a list of all of the requirements for each school you're interested in. When I did this for my application, I came to the number 4. That included 2 professors, my PI since I had done undergraduate research, and a physician that I had shadowed. But that was not even including those like highly suggested or recommended letters that some of the schools were asking for. My total number of letters that I ended up submitting was 6. That's right, 6. Now, I know some of you are sitting there thinking, 6 letters of recommendation, oh my gosh, what is she thinking? That is so extra. I know, it seems like a lot, but remember, okay, 4 out of those 6 were like non-negotiables. I had to submit those just to even get the schools to process my application. And then the 2 additional letters were my character references. Now, I talked a lot about character references in my last video, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that here, but just know that they're so important and medical schools are very interested in hearing them, so do not underestimate them and please include at least 1, but maybe 2. Okay, now moving on to question number 2. When are you supposed to start asking for these letters? One thing I found when I was going around and asking people in my life if they would pretty please with cherries on top write a recommendation for me is that a lot of them already had their own deadline for how much time in advance you needed to give them in order for them to write you a recommendation. So, in my experience, that was usually a minimum of 4 weeks. Sometimes, however, it was a minimum of 6 weeks. That's like the official answer. But off the record, honestly, I would recommend more like 8 weeks. And this is because of the way that the submission process works. With my school, and I know with a lot of other schools, your college will basically set up this online portal for you. And so you invite your recommenders into this portal, you give them like an email invite, and they upload their letters through this system. Then your college can look through and approve all of your letters, and then finally submit them off to the schools. I started asking for letters what I thought was pretty early. By the time it was 6 weeks before my deadline, I had talked to every single recommender, I had met with them in person, we were like good to go by 6 weeks. And I still struggled to get a couple of those letters in on time. And it wasn't because my recommenders were taking their time or not taking it seriously. It was strictly because of technical difficulties and we had to, keep resubmitting certain letters and it wasn't accepting certain recommenders and it was just kind of a mess. So I would highly recommend an 8-week period of time to give yourself plenty of wiggle room because 6 weeks would be like everything going exactly according to plan and you can never bet on that happening. Now I want to spend a little bit more time talking about that submission process and really digging into the details on that because it's kind of confusing. There are basically 3 different ways that this can go. And it all depends on what type of process your undergraduate school has in place. So the first thing that could happen is you could have a committee letter. Now, this is basically when your pre-health advisor or your pre-health committee writes a letter of recommendation on your behalf. It's basically a cover letter for all of your other letters of recommendation, and then they put it all together and they send them to the schools. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is a letter packet. So this is actually what my school did for me. So I didn't have a committee letter. I didn't have anything that my advisor actually wrote on my behalf. I just submitted all of my other letters of recommendation to them through that portal that I was talking about. They looked through them, put them all together into a packet, and then sent them off to the schools. Now, both of those options are basically just a way for your undergraduate school to show that they support your application to medical school, that they think you've got what it takes to be a good doctor. Now, option number 3 is that if your school does not offer one of those other 2 things, then you will just submit your letters directly to AMCAS on the application. So you're basically cutting out the middleman. Alright, so point number 4, how much guidance should you actually be giving your recommenders as they're writing these letters for you? So here's the thing. I know that you are an overstressed, overworked, underslept pre-med student. I get that. I was there. So there's going to be extreme temptation to just pass this off to your recommenders, let them do their thing, and not worry about it. But that would be the wrong move. And that's because the more work you put in on the front end to make sure that your recommender is prepared, the higher quality letter they can come up with in the end. So I would highly recommend that you have a sort of skeleton email that you can send to all of your different recommenders with all of the information and resources that they're going to need. And for content in this email, first you're going to want to explain the whole submission process to them. So they may never have interacted with this portal before. You're going to have to give them the link and the login info and anything else they might need to submit the letter on your behalf. You're also going to want to have in big, bold, underlined letters the deadline for the letter to be submitted. And then finally, you're going to want to talk about the content of their actual evaluation. Now, the biggest thing you need to emphasize here is the importance of tangible examples in the letter. So for example, a kind of subpar letter of recommendation might read something like, "Oh, Alexa's so great. She obviously cares about the other students in her class and she's very hardworking." Now, obviously, I would love it if somebody said those things about me. However, it's not specific enough for a medical school letter of recommendation. A better version of that same letter would read something like, "It's obvious to me that Alexa genuinely cares about the students in her class. I often see her staying behind after lecture to explain important concepts to other students. I've known her to arrange study groups with her friends, and I've even seen her bring candy into class on exam day." That would be a much better letter, because first of all, it shows that the person writing the letter actually knows who I am, so it kind of gives credibility to them as a recommender. And secondly, it just stands out more. Medical schools want to know who you really are as a person, and so telling stories and giving anecdotes really brings you to life as like a real person and not just an applicant on a piece of paper. And to help with that, I always attach to my emails the AMCAS Letters of Evaluation Guidelines, and I'll link that in the description. I talked about it in my last video. It's basically a list of qualities that med schools are looking for in their applicants, so it's really great if your recommenders are trying to figure out which stories would be best to include in their letters. So speaking of attachments, I have a few other things that I highly recommend you attach in this email, and these are all going to be resources that are going to help your recommenders write an even better and more in-depth letter for you. So first of all, your college transcript. Number 2, your resume. Number 3, a preliminary list of the medical schools you're applying to. Number 4, your personal statement, or if you haven't written it yet, then maybe just a general outline of some of the things that you're going to include in your personal statement. Finally, and this is something a little bit more specific to me, but I always included the poster that I did for my research project. Now, the reason that I included that was because out of all of my extracurriculars, research was one of the things that I was most passionate about and was by far the thing I spent the most time on. So I included that just to give my recommenders a better idea of who I am, what I'm passionate about, and what I'm looking for in a medical career. Hopefully now you have everything you need to start asking for those letters and getting those recommendations in. You got this. If you have any questions or have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!